For 9 days, the answer was no. No to the transplant, no to the surgery. Her own doctor said gave her a 65% chance to live. Nataline Sarkisyan was 17 years old, and her insurance company had a word for the operation that would have saved her. The word was experimental. Then the cameras arrived, and with a crowd chanting outside its front doors, the company changed its answer to yes. It agreed to pay. Nataline died hours later. This is not a story about a villain in a boardroom. There's no scene where someone twirls a mustache and decides to let a teenager die. It's something quieter than that, and in a way, something worse. It's a story about a single word buried in a health plan, a word that quietly decides who gets treated and who runs out of time. That word is experimental, because here is the thing almost nobody understands about how coverage really works. When a treatment costs $450,000, an insurance company doesn't have to look you in the eye and say no. It never has to say your life isn't worth the money. It only has to say no to the procedure. It only has to decide that the operation falls into a category it has already agreed in advance not to pay for. And there is a second piece of paper, one you have almost certainly never read, that made sure no court in the country could ever hold anyone accountable when it did. This is how the fine print ran out the clock on a dying 17-year-old. Nataline Mary Sarkisyan was 14 years old when she was diagnosed with leukemia. Her family lived in Glendale, California, a close, loud, loving Armenian-American family, and for 3 years she fought. Chemotherapy, hospital stays, remission, relapse, the whole brutal machinery of childhood cancer. Her mother barely left her side. Her twin brother watched her disappear and come back and disappear again. And she was winning. That's the part that makes this unbearable. The cancer was being beaten. But the same treatment that was saving her from leukemia was quietly poisoning something else. Her liver began to fail. It's a known risk, the price the body sometimes pays for surviving the cure. And her doctors at UCLA, one of the best hospitals in the country, said there was still a way out. She needed a new liver, a transplant, and in their clinical judgment, that transplant gave her a 65% chance of surviving the next 6 months. Sit with that number, 65%. For a 17-year-old, that is not a long shot. That is not a miracle. That is a door still standing open. 2 out of 3. The family had insurance, real insurance, coverage through her father's job at Mercedes-Benz. They had done everything right. They believed the door would stay open. It didn't. On December 11, 2007, the insurer, a company called Cigna, gave its answer. It denied coverage for the transplant. And the reason, in the exact language of the plan, was that the procedure was experimental, investigational, and/or unproven. Read those words again slowly. Experimental, investigational, unproven. Now understand what they are actually doing. Nataline's own doctors, transplant specialists at UCLA, had reviewed her case and recommended the surgery. To them, it wasn't experimental at all, it was medicine. But the plan's fine print never asked what her doctors thought. An exclusion clause like this doesn't weigh a patient's odds. It doesn't sit at the bedside. It runs a simple test. Does this procedure fit inside a box the company has already decided not to pay for? And once a treatment is labeled experimental, the conversation is over. It doesn't matter how sick you are or how good your odds could be. The label does the work. The estimated cost of that transplant was around $450,000. And this is the quiet cruelty of an exclusion clause. The company never has to say your life is too expensive. It only has to say the treatment doesn't qualify. The paperwork does the killing at arm's length. Clean, deniable, procedural. Nobody's fingerprints are on it, and the family did not have weeks to argue. A failing liver does not negotiate. They had days. So the family did the only thing they had left. They went public. Outside Cigna's offices in Glendale, they stood on the sidewalk, and they were joined by others who knew this fight, the California Nurses Association and a consumer rights group called Consumer Watchdog. They protested, they chanted, they held up signs with Nataline's face on them, a smiling teenager staring back at the company that had said no. And this time, unlike the private letter 9 days earlier, the cameras came. CNN carried it live. For 9 days, a denial had lived quietly inside a private health plan, invisible to everyone but the family it was crushing. Now it was on national television in front of millions of people. And under that spotlight, with reporters watching and the company's name on every chyron, Cigna reversed itself. On December 20th, it agreed to pay for the transplant. But watch the clock. That reversal came after 9 days of no. 9 days a failing liver simply does not have. By the time the yes arrived, it was already too late for the yes to mean anything. Hours after the company agreed to pay, Nataline Sarkisyan died. The surgery never happened. The check was never cashed. The door had already closed. And then grief did what grief does. It went looking for accountability. The family hired the attorney, Mark Garagos, who filed a wrongful death lawsuit and a second claim, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The argument was simple and devastating. The 9-day delay had cost Nataline her life. The Los Angeles district attorney was asked to consider whether what happened rose to the level of murder. Critics called it corporate homicide. For a moment, it looked like an insurance company might actually stand trial for the death of a child. But this is where the second piece of paper appears, the one almost no one outside a courtroom has ever heard of. Nataline's coverage was an employer health plan, and employer health plans in the United States are governed by a federal law called ERISA. Now, ERISA was written to protect workers' benefits, but over the decades, the courts turned it into something else, a shield. Under a Supreme Court decision called Pilot Life versus DeDoakes, handed down back in 1987, ERISA blocks most damage claims against those plans over a coverage decision. Not because the decision was correct, not because anyone reviewed the facts, but because of where the decision lived, inside an employer plan on the protected side of the law. So the civil suit was thrown out. Read that carefully. It was not dismissed because a jury heard what happened and decided the company had done nothing wrong. No jury ever heard it. It was dismissed on procedural grounds. The technical rules of who is even allowed to be sued and for what. Under ERISA, in most cases, a family in this position cannot sue for the value of the life that was lost. At most, they might recover the cost of the denied benefit itself. The clause that ran out the clock was protected by a second clause that ran out the courtroom. Two pieces of fine print working together, and neither one ever had to explain itself. And then something happened that the industry never saw coming. Wendell Potter, the Cigna Vice President of Corporate Communications, the very executive who had advised the company to reverse its decision under those cameras, walked away. He resigned, and then he turned around and testified against his own industry before the United States Congress. He wrote a book called Deadly Spin about how insurance companies manage the public's outrage, how they frame the story, how they make a case like Nataline's disappear from the headlines. The company's own spokesman became its most famous accuser. When an insider like that changes sides, it tells you the problem was never one bad decision, it was the machine. Nataline Sarkisyan is not remembered because a court ever found anyone guilty. No court ever did. She is remembered because her family refused to let one word, experimental, and one loophole, the shield built around it, be the last thing anyone ever said about her. Her case became a touchstone in the fight over American healthcare, a name people kept saying when they argued about what coverage is really for. So here is the question this story leaves on the table. Somewhere in the plan you get through your job, the plan whose fine print you never chose and probably never read, there is a list of words that quietly decide what counts as proven. Experimental, investigational, unproven. And behind that list, there is a second set of rules that decides whether anyone could ever be held responsible if they get it wrong. Do you know what's on those lists? Do you know which side of the shield your plan sits on? Because the clock only matters when it's already running, and by then, it's too late to read. We read the fine print, so you don't have to. This is the fine print.